What was the name of the bad guy from Tron? Yeah, this is gonna drive me nuts. Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
And Jacob Gulliver.
And welcome to our TRON 40th Anniversary Retrospective podcast. That's right. We got this in literally at the second to last day that we could. Yeah, I'm glad it worked out. Okay, so just jumping right into it. This is a big one, guys. So I'll be honest with you. When I was growing up, I knew more about this movie as far as I definitely knew about the video game. I'm gonna spin you a little nostalgic yarn if you
Perfect.
Look at all these spools.
So my family would take a yearly trip to the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. And one of my favorite things to do at the boardwalk would be to go to the arcade, and they actually had this little kind of hole in the wall within the big arcade that was just called the Classics Corner. And within the Classics Corner was the one arcade machine that I could find in all of the Bay Area that actually had a Tron unit. And so that was always like a special thing for me about going to the boardwalk. It was like kind of part of the part of the experience, part of the itinerary of going to the boardwalk. I always needed to play that Tron machine. Like I played it way earlier. Like I probably played that Tron machine before I even knew it was a movie or really connected the dots on it. I totally sucked on it. It's a brutally hard game even to this day. But yeah, that's like my main kind of connective memory of this IP and this franchise. And I will admit, as a teenager, I appreciated this movie. I didn't necessarily. I loved the concept of it, right? I didn't necessarily like my basic thesis for this upon a rewatch is I feel like this movie has aged actually surprisingly gracefully. And the reason I say that is because there was definitely a point in time where the effects of this movie, to some extent, one could argue looked aged. And I will argue that rewatching this movie in a modern context with everything being as CG as it is, I think this movie looks freaking incredible. Yeah. I really do. I think time has kind of come back around on this movie, and I am digging the designs, the matte paintings. I mean, the costuming is a little bit corny, but still really cool with the with how the costumes light up and everything. I think the one issue this movie has is that it's a little bit clunky with the dialogue. There's definitely some some exposition dumps to be had here. And I don't necessarily think the characters are all that great. Like Kevin Flynn is great. Tron is decent as just a standard hero character. This is not a character centric movie. In a weird way, I feel like this movie was kind of the avatar of its day in a weird way, just as far as like it was much more about the spectacle. Even though, like, I feel like on a plot level, it has a lot to say. Like on a philosophical level, I just don't necessarily think the characters they're not bad. I just think they're relatively
programs.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, I mean, it did its job maybe a little too well. But, I mean, suffice to say, like I said, just rewatching this thing, I was honestly kind of floored by just how well it holds up visually. I mean, I really think it's like just all those matte paintings and how the matte paintings combine with the computer effects and how that combines with the live actors. It's just freaking like incredible how they did it back in the day. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this. I still think it holds up pretty well as far as like the pacing and the plot mechanics. My only issue is less so the characters, more so the exposition dumps. But I still think it's an absolute classic. It's probably the best Star Wars ripoff. I will say that much. Because it is very much a Star Wars ripoff, but it's a damn good one. All right, Gulliver, I'll throw it to you.
Well, first off, I want to say all of the wonderful yarn that you have spun there has knitted me a very warm and cozy hat. I was tickled and touched, and I felt the nostalgia
nice,
there.
nice.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely in agreement on a lot of that. I think you're definitely right that there's elements of plot. I would honestly say like the editing is the toughest part of this
Mhm,
movie for
mhm.
me. And I'm sure part of it is the limitation of working within, like, we have to get this effect to do this thing or else it doesn't work, and we have to get this thing connected to this thing or else this doesn't work, kind of elements of it. And so I don't really fault it for that. If they had, the kind of unlimited budgets that we see today with a lot of big budget movies, I think they would have been able to clean it up a little bit more. But really, they were asking for way more than was available to do this movie. That the vision behind this movie is so strong and so iconic. No matter how many flaws it's got, it is absolutely one that's ingrained into people's memories, um, in a fascinating way. And I think that kind of outshines any of those little sort of flaws in editing or in dialogue. And I would guess that it could be there, if there was footage somewhere to go in and clean up that edit, it could be done, and there would be a masterful director's cut. But I don't think it's going to happen, and I'm appreciative for what it is regardless. I think it's iconic. I think it's genius.
All right, cool. Dragon.
Yeah, so I mean, my nostalgia with Tron, I mean, honestly, it very much came from. I think we'd all seen like a little piece of Tron when it was advertised, or at least like replayed, or like I forget if
Mhm.
it ever came on the Disney Channel or not, but it's somewhere it came on, and it was like you kind of caught a glimpse of it somehow. But when I really got to know what the heck Tron was, outside like the aesthetic of like, okay, it's the people in the white and the blue, doing the stuff with the disc and the lacrosse scoop thing, well, the highlight scoop thing. Um, for me, it was learning that the correlation Tron had to Pixar. That was the thing that really put Tron on my map. In which
Mhm.
there are three films in the history of Pixar that lead to both Pixar and Toy Story. Three very important movies. Well, three unexpectedly important movies, I should say. You got Howard the Duck starting things off. Because Howard the Duck bombs and puts Lucas in a position where he would basically be inclined to need to sell the Pixar the burgeoning Pixar division. And then you have Tron, which basically is a milestone in terms of using computer generated imagery in a film for a sustained period of time versus like a brief like millisecond. Like, hey, look, we brought up a computer graphic versus like, oh god, we're actually integrating it into a film. For like we have a light cycle sequence. Man, this was very much like that lit the fire of like, hey, we can integrate computer animation into hand drawn or any other mediums, or perhaps God forbid we do an entire film in this style. Which then brings us to the Brave Little Toaster, which was basically it was a proposed like kind of a blending of the
Mhm.
mediums, which of course that then all these factors led to Toy Story essentially down the line. So again, Tron very key in all of that. So Tron's always been on my radar because of that, and then of course through it's constantly kind of reappearing through pop culture. Like my associate here opened a little podcast with when Peter Griffin's like posing that question, I'm saying David Warner. It's David Warner.
Sark.
Yeah. The correct answer is Sark, Dragon.
Technically David
Yeah,
Warner is
Ed
three.
Dillinger.
He is technically all three villains, though. To be
That's
fair, so
true.
David
That's
Warner is
true.
all encompassing. So I'd be inclined to say Dillinger, but then again, Master Control Program is probably the correct answer for being frank.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm
I
saying.
think Stark is like the he's the poster bad guy, I would
Oh, of
say.
course. I mean, he gets all the
Yeah.
good lines.
Uh-huh.
Anyway,
If they were to remake Tron, I always wanted to see Michael Shannon play Sark.
Mm.
Michael Shannon.
Yes.
That would be fun. So, in regards to the film itself, though, looking back on it, after it's been around for 40 years. Again, I think it's a hugely influential and experimental film. With its use of CGI. It's it's kind of, I mean, I hesitate on the Star Wars thing. I know it was intended to kind of be like, hey, we have our own, Disney's trying to build their own Star Wars before years later they would actually own the Star Wars. It's very much like THX 1138, the movie. It feels a
for
lot
sure,
like
in
that.
vibes, yeah.
Yeah. And visually, this thing visually, it holds up so well to me. I mean, visually, plus not even just the visual of the computer when we're in the computer itself, but the film stock and everything leading up to that. The colors are so rich. The cinematography is beautiful. It's the thing looks. Once
I'm
they did
excited to
that
talk about that arcade scene, man.
As I'm saying, when they did like the HD remaster, like on the reloads, they kind of cleaned things up after a few decades. I imagine probably for like probably 2012 when Legacy was coming out, they probably re-released it as a guess. Whenever they did, it looks phenomenal. And that's the thing. The now dated effects, when we mentioned the CG, they add like an otherworldly charm. So
I
even if
truly
it's
think they've looped back around to being impressive again. I really do.
so that's the thing. It's like it's kind of insulated itself unknowingly years later. Of like at the time it was they were pushing the boundaries. Like, well, this was very foreign to everybody back in the days before like laptops and basically the computer, the AOL, if you will, it's before everything. This is
right.
and this is before like the dial-up age. And yeah, this was it was pushing the boundaries then, and now when you look at it, even in the modern setting, it's like, hey, this is this is again, it looks otherworldly. Again, one of the adages for this movie when they're making it was kind of Pong meets Alice in Wonderland. You kind of get that vibe. It is kind of Pong meets Alice in Wonderland.
Pong meets Alice in Wonderland.
I mean, it's kind of there. There's like an Atari vibe.
Yeah.
There's an Atari vibe to the look of this thing, and it's very charming.
There's also a Pac-Man cameo.
Yep. So anyway, so again, of course, you have two great lead actors here with Jeff Bridges and David Warner, who I just relish in when they're on screen, particularly David Warner, of course, very appropriate this year. We're talking Tron, and sadly he's passed, so again, it's kind of relative. Yeah, the way that works. The point is, I love the aesthetic and I love the filmmaking on this, but I do agree it's a bit style over substance because of the experimental kind of aspect of this film. In doing so, the exact plot semantics I feel are a little hard to track as we get to Act 3. Like after we know why we're there, but beyond that, it's like, okay, how is this leading us to our finale essentially? And then of course we have some of our characters who are again they're programs. By the same token, though, I'm no expert, but in a movie called Tron, perhaps Tron should have more screen presence. I don't know. Perhaps like the character should, I don't know, just a little bit, or maybe have. Well, I don't want to speculate and rewrite things. The point being, it certain aspects in terms of our story and characterization could have been stronger, yes. But again, overall, the thing aesthetically, it's very pleasing. It's a fun movie.
To me, it's all in that edit. It's like if they'd started with the scene of Alan, Bruce Boxleitner's character, at the computer working on Tron and then getting called up to Ed Dillinger's office.
Yeah.
And like explaining like, no, you can't use Tron because he's messing with MCP. And then we get into the other characters.
Yeah.
No problem for me. But that wasn't the way
it would have helped considerably, yes. Either that or like it was debatable.
I think even starting with Flynn and Clue would have helped.
Well, another thing.
I agree that the first scene is just very awkwardly like, and we're just thrown into this situation.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing too is the fact of like they made a choice deliberately to, if I recall, I'm pretty sure about it, like we don't cut away once we're in the game. We don't cut out of the game at all.
No, they don't. Yeah.
Now that's a thing.
End, obviously.
Now, to be fair, that's a thing ordinarily we ask for more of, but in this case, it feels like we could have broken up and maybe show what Alan was doing on the outside to maybe help him, or at least in sending
I'm glad you brought that up because I was actually kind of like thinking that in my head, like, man, this really like just seeing Alan in that one interaction that him and Tron had would have, I think, gone a long way.
Because Tron loves Alan, man. Alan's his daddy, essentially. He's his master. He's the user. Loves this guy. A lot of reverence for him. Anyway.
All right, so Dragon, go ahead and hit us with some background.
All right,
try not to get too deep into the Pixar lore. If you can.
No, of course. I front loaded that. We don't need to really get into that again. We're all good there. So this is written and directed by Steve Lisberger. he was essentially he was kind of an experimental animator at the time. This guy was a true blue kind of like by the bootstraps, kind of working his way up kind of animator. He the fine folks at Pixar. He in the age of kind of burgeoning, like on the edge of computer animation, but still just like any animator. He started in commercials. He did ads like Pete Docter and Andrew Stanton did. What he specialized in, though, he specialized in this kind of technique, backlit animation, which is a little, I mean, basically it's the neon effect on the suits in Tron. That's essentially what backlit animation is in terms of how it affects this. So it's kind of like it's kind of stuff done on black paper, kind of like Batman the Animated Series with a dark deco sort of art style. It's a little like that too. Just imagine if it glowed in the dark, little Jackson Pollock-esque, if you will. Let's see. So anyway. So again, this is also like the basically matte paintings kind of layered on to kind of a rotoscope sort of animation as well. Which again, basically, long story short, it's how you get the glowing neon effect. So yeah, and they did this one ad. One of the standout ads that they did had this backlit character with the neon effect, and it was an electronic. It was either an ad for electronics or basically the effect they kind of felt had an electronic vibe to it, so they nicknamed it Tron. And he was tossing a disc in the ad. So, it's kind of like an Olympic kind of esque sort of thing.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Speaking of the Olympic esque sort of thing with the discus throw. So Listberger here, he did these animated, basically did like some animated specials. I want to say got broken up during the Olympics. They kind of played during a few years of the Olympics, and like half the spots got kind of axed because they there was like the second year they did this sort of thing. It was like when they canceled the Olympics for a time. Yeah, so the point is, they did this thing called Animal Olympics, where essentially it's like, okay, it's cutesy things where animals are.
Olympics. Oh yes.
So this is the guy behind the Animal Olympics, and essentially the first chunk of the Animal Olympics funded the early versions of Tron. Basically, he was producing this on his own, not as a studio movie, but kind of he had his own animation studio. Again, he was really building stuff, and essentially he was like, okay, I want to do this Tron movie. So I got a bunch of animators together, but I use kind of the funds of this to do a proof of concept, and then hopefully a studio will distribute it for us or something along those lines. And that lands him at Disney eventually during the Ron Miller era of Disney, and very much the son-in-law of Walt era. The guy was like, I'm much of a creative, but I want to keep the truck going. And they met with a computer programmer, I believe, Alan Kay. This led to a lot of the research on like what the computer was, and kind of led into like the logic of the world building of Tron and the effects and so on and so forth. Now they compiled essentially a proof of concept sort of thing, and they showed Ron Miller and the heads at Disney, and they were like, "Well, this is great. We're all for pushing the boundaries here, but how the heck are you guys going to do this? You pitched us in these amazing paintings. I don't know how you're going to realize that in CG. What is that?" As we know, with the production of the Brave Little Toaster, selling Disney in the '80s on computer integration, computer animation was no small feat.
Right.
So basically, the passion of Listberger really sold him here and to give them a shot. And essentially, Disney approved a few sequences. Okay, guys, we're going to give you some money. You do some test of a few sequences from Tron to give us an idea of how it looks. And they showed Disney this, won them over. And Disney, again, as established for Brave Little Toaster, they were very scared of the computers. So again, it's the idea of that you can't really show dailies at that time, at least not easily. And when they did the computer animation, this was essentially what they would have to do painstakingly is write down the numbers. They couldn't really even fully type it up sometimes. They had to write down the numbers of code and then send it to essentially a computer company. It's crazy. It's a very painstaking process. You can't. Basically, this is before you could download.
Right.
It's that far back. So this was intensively storyboarded, which, by the way, at the time, only animated film storyboarded movies. This was not something that was all the time done. Usually in live action, they would storyboard action sequences that'd be really hard to do. So you make sure you got all your shots for a really complicated day of filming, not only dialogue stuff and everything. Mm-hmm. So this is like the whole movie was essentially boarded like an animated movie.
Makes sense.
Especially since it was so effects intensive. You want to make sure all the shots are like right there. Let's see. Jeff Bridges, he was very sold on the premise. This very burgeoning actor, Jeff Bridges. It's like, yeah. Well, he was sold, and the whole guy gets sucked into a computer. What's not to love? That sounds fascinating. And he was, sucked in there. They had video games, like kind of the old the old kind of arcade games were on set to boost morale and basically get the actors. This is a clever idea on the director's part. Kind of reckless in terms of delaying production because people are playing video games, but still, the idea that in the thing George Lucas ran into on the prequels. It's really hard to imagine the world that you're in, given you're seeing like tennis balls and like little X's, like little X's and marks and stuff. So what it is, okay, guys, you're gonna play the video games and essentially imagine that is what you're seeing around.
That's actually so clever,
right?
And that was the idea. So put them in a visual headspace. Let's see. So, as Tiki alluded to, they were expecting this in the age of Star Wars, which this is, I believe, I forget when Jedi came out. Do you guys remember when Return of the Jedi came out?
83, I think.
I think that sounds about okay. Well, the point being, like, at least two of the Star Wars movies had come out at this point, so they were very much chasing the Star Wars dragon, as it were. And yeah, they were kind of hoping it would do Star Wars numbers. It was a big sci-fi thing. It had a really distinctive look and everything. And unfortunately for them, it was not so much the fault of Tron or Disney marketing. It was more so the problem of this was kind of a foreign thing with, like, again, computers being in such focus when people hardly knew what computers were at this time. But more so, you had its competition, which was the stiffest competition you could ever give a movie ever. You had E.T. as the main competition. You had stuff like Wrath of Khan. You had Blade Runner. This was not a good year for Tron to come out.
Yeah.
And even the rub the salt in the wound even more. Okay, so the movie comes out. Here's the thing. I think it made its money back, from what I understand, but Disney was still, they wanted big numbers from this, so it did disappoint them with their expectations. But the Academy gave them some nominations for sound and stuff like that. Oddly, though, bafflingly, did not
visual
get
effects. Are you fucking serious?
And would you like to know the reason?
Is it because it was like too ahead of its time?
Was it too animated?
Something like that?
It's dumber than those reasons, gentlemen.
Oh, God.
Okay, the reason, I think this is the official reason the Academy gave, I'm pretty sure, is that you cheated. Basically, they viewed computer animation as cheating in visual effects. I'm not kidding you. I'm pretty sure they used the exact words, like when they were asked, like they said, you cheat, or something very close to you cheated. Which is,
that kind of reminds me of like one of my biggest gripes with the Academy not nominating something ever was them not nominating Johnny Greenwood's score for There Will Be Blood. And the reason they gave was because at the very fucking end of the movie, like the very tail end of it, there's like a little sting of like classical music that Greenwood himself did not write. They're like, oh, because of that, it's not an original score. But then it's like, after that, they've nominated so many other things that have that same caveat. And I'm like, what the fuck did you just do? You just passed over like one of the most iconic scores of the 2000s. Good job, Oscars.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry, that was personal.
On the note of score, we should give a brief shout out to the composer of this film, Wendy Carlos.
Sure.
Out and proud trans as of 1979.
Oh wow!
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think there's some really unique stuff in here in terms of synth sounds that are a bit ahead of their time.
Definitely.
And the kind of replication of the sounds that are used for video games applied to a more cinematic quality is something that has been echoed in a lot of other films after this. So I think it's definitely some ground laying, some genre breaking kind of stuff. And I'm a fan of that. I think that's really great.
So I guess in closing for the background, just again, this very much inspired again, so Pixar, and of course, so in that regard, it was a very huge impact on the industry with basically introducing computer animation on film in a big way and a sustained way, which of course then again inspires Toy Story, and then of course gets into a lot of pop culture references and pop culture osmosis with people referencing just how big and memorable Tron was, and then of course 30 years later, we get Tron Legacy, which kind of reinvigorates things a bit.
Yeah.
Gets us Tron, is it Uprising? It's Tron Uprising, right?
That's the series, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it gets us, Legacy and then Uprising and some theme park development that may or may not have gone anywhere.
Yeah, Gulliver, are you aware of how long it's taking the fucking Disney World Tron coaster to open? Like that whole situation. Do you
I
know
am
anything
not.
about that?
No.
See, if they didn't come out this year, they've really missed their mark entirely, don't you think?
Okay, so Gulliver, they announced it in, I believe, I want to say 2017. And this is literally like in the damn. I'm sorry, folks. I'm gonna have to get on like a little bit of a
Do it.
rant
This is
here.
your thing. Do it.
So, like, the damn thing is a clone, meaning like it already exists in Shanghai, and they're not even really doing anything to it. It's literally like a brick by brick recreation. And it's taken
I
them
remember
what?
seeing
Like,
stuff. There's like you get on like a fake light cycle, right?
Yeah.
yeah, you get on a
Yeah, I've
fake
seen
like,
vid-
there's not even
yeah.
like there's not even that much as far as the
Like,
theme
imagine
goes.
the ET ride as a roller coaster.
No, false. That
Wait,
is
really?
false. The ET ride has animatronics and set pieces.
All right, fine. So I mean the bicycle thing. It's like laid out like the bicycle.
Oh yes, right. Yeah, as far as the ride vehicle.
That's
goes,
what I meant in terms of a ride
I'm
vehicle,
sorry.
but a roller coaster.
But like as far as the roller coaster goes, like there's not really a lot of physical stuff to it. There's like some lights and some projections. And it's taken them 6 years. 6 goddamn years. What the hell?
Maybe there's
Universal has literally announced and built full lands in the time it has taken Disney to fucking make this thing. All right,
maybe
I'm
there's
done.
like
I'm
one
done.
executive that's like, we got to scrap this project, and another executive who's like, this is the one thing I will do before I die, and those two are just fighting each other behind the scenes indefinitely.
And what was really crazy about it is that the show building was like the show building's literally built right on the route of the railroad.
Yeah.
So in that whole time, you had the railroad down. That whole time. It was fucking nuts. All right, I'm done.
Okay. Anyway, so that's the story of Tron.
All right, Theme Park Priest says Tron is rather philosophical in my opinion. Would you live differently if you're always so close from game over? We can start on some of the because the movie is very philosophical. I feel like in some ways it's there's definitely some anti-fascist undertones in there, I think.
Anti-capitalist for sure.
Definitely kind of a religious component with the whole user program.
Absolutely,
kind of dynamic. Yeah. The whole against the whole
Yeah.
creationism thing where we were created by our users. That whole
Yeah.
it's like you get it's also like the old like robot thing of like, does the technology have a soul? Which, well, I mean, as we represent it here visually, the programs take on the shape of their users, as in like the person that programmed or has ownership over them. Ergo, the way we give them like personality and life, it's like a piece of their soul is kind of there. So it's like it's inferring them, so they do kind of have a soul, which makes their deaths even more horrific. Just ask poor Ram.
Yeah.
Oh God.
There's also a good statement about like artistic ownership and sort of the corporatization of art.
Yeah, take note, Ready Player One.
Yeah, right. Just like the way that Wendy Carlos also worked in the music department on Ready Player One. Interestingly enough,
that's funny.
I'm sure she was brought back as like a throwback for what she was emulating. But but yeah, I think the interaction between Alan and Dillinger, is really interesting in the sense that they're both kind of diplomatic about it, but you can tell they both have ideas about how the code is valuable versus, the code makes us money. And you get that a little bit with the older guy too, whose name I'm forgetting. The guy who,
I know his game name.
His game name is Dumont. Yeah, but I can't remember I can't remember the older guy's name. Anyway,
he was with a
I think
W or something. But I'm sorry, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that there were that many movies at the time where like the big business was the bad guy. There's a few, but not like tons and tons like there are now.
Yeah, we hate the suits now. Hang them by their neckties.
So it's actually kind of interesting because this has like long since been an opinion of mine. Like I actually think that the actor playing Ram is a little bit more charismatic than old Brucey over here.
No, I absolutely agree with that.
I'm sorry to say it. I'm sorry.
I know that's the frustrating thing about the movie, where it's like, I mean, look,
they killed off the more interesting one.
See, I'm going to make this pitch, okay? To me, it seems like the film should have been under Alan's instructions before, when he mentions Tron. Somehow, if Flynn could have he somehow had the code for Tron or something on his person that they did what he did at the end.
Right,
of the movie,
right, yeah.
If Tron were not a physical guy, but basically Jeff Bridges kind
Tron
of becoming
is introduced into this movie in the most awkward way, man.
It's like, hey, what's your name? Tron, you? Practically.
No, it's not even that. It's more like, hey, who's that guy? That's Tron.
Yeah, it's pretty much it. I don't know, it just feels like, again, given
although I will say that the opening action scene that Tron gets, the racquetball type game, that is really cool.
Yeah. No, it is cool. It just feels like, again, if Flynn's going to be our main guy, shouldn't we just give him essentially the Tron moniker somehow, or at least have him be involved?
Flynn should be Tron, yeah.
Or at the very least, his journey makes him into Tron or something, or, Walter, there you go. Walter says, is it Lord of the Rings fan? Is that
Lord of the Rings and ER.
Right, Lord of the Rings and ER.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lord of the Rings and ER fan.
Wait. Lord of the Rings and ER is in the medical show ER?
Yes.
Yeah.
Two of Laura's favorite things.
Oh, awesome. Okay. I did not know the ER side of that, but that's cool. That's funny. All right.
Okay.
Anyways.
So, but and Ram's death is heartbreaking, man. I mean, I think Jeff Bridges steals the
show. I love how they turn it into a religious experience, though. Like it's a very spiritual thing with Ram, kind of like in his last moments, getting the the confirmation of his beliefs.
I mean, this is nowhere near the same scene, mind you, but it's just to kind of give you a vibe of what they're kind of circling around. It's a little like that scene Galaxy Quest with by Graftar's Hammer with Alan Rickman.
Right, yeah.
It's a little like basically kind of a little validating sort of thing. You are a user, the whole they've kind of given up hope on the users at this point. Like, there's no way this guy's a user. Come on, it's like God, touching us with the finger sort of thing. It's not happening. They're clicking the mouse in this case, what have you.
So I want to talk about Flynn because I think that Kevin Flynn is like I don't care what I like. It's for me, it's the definitive Jeff Bridges role.
Well, really, more than the dude.
Yeah. The thing with the dude is that I watched that movie kind of after it had kind of exploded into the cult film circles.
Yeah.
So I never got the hype for Big Lebowski.
Well, even if you don't get the hype, but that's the more definitive performance than
yes, for me, yes.
Okay.
It's because I have much more of an attachment, but yes.
Well, what's funny to me about Jeff Bridges' character in this movie, and Gulliver, I don't know if you're familiar with this guy or not. I don't know if you watched the documentary or not. So Flynn feels so much like Howard Warshaw from Atari, who did the ET game during the whole
Atari for sure.
Game over. He feels so much like that guy. He's got sound. Basically, if he had the beard, like we know he has in Tron Legacy for at least a brief bit, like Jeff Bridges' famous beard, it feels like again he'd be almost identical to that guy. Kind of a little more facial hair. I think he'd be that guy entirely.
So I let me ask you guys this. So we meet Flynn at first, and this is kind of what Gulliver was talking about with the pacing. It's a little awkward.
Yeah.
Where we meet him at first, and we see that whole thing with Clue. And by the way, I as a fan of this movie, I was geeking the hell out that they brought back Clue of all characters for the sequel.
Yeah.
I was like, that is a deep cut, and I am into it. But so that's basically our introduction to Kevin Flynn, the programmer hacker. And then I almost kind of wish that the first time we see Kevin Flynn would have been at the arcade, because I really Dragon. You were talking about how much the live action stuff pops, and that whole Flynn's arcade sequence is just oh my god, it's like 80s nostalgia porn.
What's great?
Like I want to just live in that arcade. Like
For sure.
I think they captured the feeling of like the early 80s arcade fever just so freaking well.
Yeah.
You know what's great about the arcade idea with Flynn? It's the idea that he's a guy who, again, he kind of lost big on on the success that he really earned for himself, and he's a humble guy, so he's a gamer at heart, so he's still like he runs the arcade and everything. But the fact that in response to this curveball, he's just this humble arcade owner, yet he's surrounded by because of that he is surrounded by bitter reminders of what he lost.
I also, yeah, that's true. That's true. But I also love how he's kind of like the king of his own kingdom in a
Yeah,
way.
I mean, he's taking it in stride. He's looking at he's having a good time at least. But yeah,
Like I love how he's just basically like, he kind of starts the film with this attitude of like, obviously he's trying to get into the the system.
he's trying to get the proof. He's trying to get the smoking gun so he can get his credit and get his wealth.
Right, but I still love how he has that kind of like, that slacker sort of persona.
Yeah.
That's almost a little bit of a mask.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think it would have been better to just like, because I really love how we introduced the character with the video game and the high score and everybody cheering him on.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. That is kind of a better introduction to that guy, but it feels like they teasing the video game, and it's a risk that they took that does kind of confuse like the rules of the world, which again is kind of my complaint of the thing, where it's like the world building looks great and looks dazzling, it is fun, but the problem is it does not hold up to scrutiny when you really think about it for a moment, where it's like, wait a minute, okay, so if the things that we do basically if someone clicking a file presumably leads to this, because again, like Kevin Flynn, he sends it's Clue, right?
Mm-hmm.
He sends Clue to essentially try to get past the firewalls and such. Your point being to go in there and try and get the proof that he's looking for. That's essentially like you on the other end of the computer while you're hacking or something. Like, okay, I'm going to click on this, and basically him clicking on said thing is sending little Clue in there to do his bidding. So that's essentially the rule they seemingly set up there. And if you think about it, I don't think it holds as well throughout the things. But again, in premise, that's great. But I don't know if it's just because we started like that and we kind of break away from that. Because I mean, it seems like we're in the computer, but it kind of almost gives you the impression it's like when you're playing the game, it almost kind of like, again, it's more you're in the computer than you're in the game. So I don't know.
I hear you.
Yeah, I definitely think the introduction of him at the arcade would be a better way to do it, and then maybe intercut the bit of him and Clue with the sequence where he's explaining that the games were stolen from him, that he authored the code,
Makes
that they were stolen. Yeah. And then we get like little snippets of him trying to get in.
What I do love about the opening we do have with Clue, though, what I love about it is that it does show an arc for Flynn. The arc, of course, being he does not value like the programs are disposable to him. Like, yeah, just do this, do that, and of course the loss of RAM is like the big sobering moment of like, oh god, look what I've been doing, and that really turns around to doing the self-sacrifice things. That's like a really good arc for him. So again, it's kind of a mixed bag, but you're right though. The more dazzling introduction to this character is that arcade scene, but again, you do have kind of a big staple of an arc in what we do have.
Yeah.
Something that's really cool in the filmmaking, though, is that when they're in the real world, we do kind of build up and we kind of naturally integrate computerized things into the design of things, like the big map painting of the office, which is like all these cubicles looks like the floor of TRON. Well, we're in, of inside the computer, and the thing that I geek out about, I gotta be honest, man, it's so weird, but just go with me on it. I love the way they shoot helicopters in this movie. I don't know why. They look amazing, but particularly David Warner's helicopter when Dillinger comes in that helicopter with the red lighting on it, which is building up the whole neon look of the game. That looks amazing. Then later on when Kevin comes in as the big high roller, there's something very practical about the helicopters, which honestly, you know what it feels like? It feels like the dangerous filmmaking of the 80s then versus the safe, like, yeah, I mean, there's a helicopter that looks impressive, whether it's usually
CG.
I
don't want to joke about this too much, but there's a big reason why we don't use helicopters now.
Well, no, but I'm just saying that it's like it's something to appreciate, like catching the lightning in a bottle. Like when you
Sure,
could
sure,
do
of
it,
course,
it is
yeah.
dangerous, it is risky, but it looks awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Helicopters are like, it's kind of like that in motorcycles are just like a trope in movie. Like you shoot them either intimidatingly or you shoot them as very heroic
Yeah.
in terms of the way that they arrive, but they're not just a vehicle to carry a person, they're also a vehicle to like introduce an element of power to your story, whether that's a positive or negative one.
What about
So I definitely agree that it's
making an entrance.
Yeah. Yep. In that case, they're kind of introducing that, heroic side, really. But
is it really heroic though?
No, I mean not.
I mean,
in this case, it's kind of heroic in the end, but here it's more.
All right, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make a point on Jurassic
Well, I'm just
Park.
saying I like the way they shot the helicopters, particularly the first one because it has like the neon lighting thing, which fits into the game thing. That's what I'm mainly saying here. It looks more practical than the way we do it today.
All right. I'd say we could talk about the other human characters, but they're kind of fucking boring.
But you know who's not boring though? David Warner. He's not boring. He's amazing. I want to talk about
David Warner, not boring. The totally pointless love triangle, what the fuck ever thing that they're doing with Lynn and the other two, boring.
David Warner's so good. He has his own love triangle with himself.
Oh my god, it's true. It's totally true, though.
You're talking about Dillinger, Sark, and MCP.
Yes.
Yeah.
So seriously, though, I mean, how great! Of course, everyone here I know is technically doing like multiple roles, but still, it's just the fact that David Warner is playing all the
Warner
bad
definitely he's the one that works out like easily the best as far as the multiple roles thing go.
I love it so much. Like, I love how all three of them are like in subservience to each other, and so like, shifting. There's a shifting power dynamic with all of them, and I love it. So it's the fact that like Sark is like the number 2 man. He's very much the muscle of the group, and I love it. He's like a spoiled gladiator. The whole like they brought me a new challenge, and he's just so yes, you're going to, and he's a little intimidated by taking on a user because of the whole religious paradigm that's going on here, the whole user programming dynamic. MCP is getting power hungry, and he's like partners with Dillinger, and now he's like trying to take over the world by taking over the Pentagon. It's insane.
Oh my god, I forgot that the Pentagon was involved.
Yeah, he's gonna like hack essentially finally global hack.
One line.
Listen, I love Dave Warner owns that space when he shows up as Dillinger, as the executive, because he has that awesome computerized desk, which is like it's all black and everything. It's very ahead of its time with all the stuff we do.
I think he's very much the villain that like Ready Player One was trying to go for, but kind of failed out a little bit.
This guy is Sorrento's wet dream. Let's be
honest. Absolutely.
Yeah, seriously, just the fact that he's there. There's just that power struggle with himself with those 3 roles, and just the fact that David Warner always bringing the charm and the class. And again, 3 different types of villain performance. He's basically playing the Emperor, Darth Vader, and Tarkin essentially in one movie. He's playing all 3.
Oh god.
Essentially. Anyway, I can go on all day about how great David Warner is in this, but water is wet. We know how wonderful the man was.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't know, like, do you guys find the love triangle stuff in this movie as freaking pointless as I do?
It's completely pointless. Yeah, I mean, what do you go for?
It doesn't bug me that much, I guess.
I honestly think my biggest hang up with the whole damn movie is that kiss at the end.
Yeah.
Where the hell did that kiss come from?
Well, it just came from the fact that this guy's a much more interesting lead. I'm going to kiss this guy. That's all it really reads as to. He just reads as, yeah, why isn't this guy the lead?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit goofy, but truly that doesn't bother me that much. There have been much worse love triangles.
Oh, absolutely.
At least here it was like kind of like a less is more sort of thing of like it makes you wonder. Like, I wonder why she's doing that. Versus like man, they're just really jamming it down her throat.
They just kind of like they hint at like what was there, but they don't stop and say like there's no dialogue about like, well, why did you leave me, Laura? Why did this go away? Or Lori,
Okay, yeah. So That is true, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, Bridges does kind of play it as, you know, he's more of just kind of like the ex-boyfriend who, like, you know, is trying to play it up for laughs and doesn't give a shit, even though he kind of does.
I mean, admittedly,
I like that dynamic to it.
Yeah.
Admittedly, at the front of things, before we get into the the video, kind of the video game of it all, there is sort of like, not to this degree, of course, but there's almost like a kind of a Casablanca sort of love triangle of sorts, in which it's not really like a huge. Well, sorry, I'm just remembering that's terrible. What I meant is, like, in regards to the Casablanca thing, it's so much
No,
like
I mean,
the
I can see what you're talking about, just as far as plot mechanics go.
mainly that the guys aren't really in rivalry over the girls. It happened, and here we are. It's kind of like it's like the Victor Laszlo thing, essentially. Like, like we're like he and Alan aren't really button heads at all. It's just like, yeah, it happened. We both like her, and there's kind of a bit of a fun dynamic there. That's really all you need. And then we kind of like, okay, so it just feels kind of tacked on.
Like I said, my main issue is with the kiss at the end, and the reason I say that is because, like, I mean, I guess she doesn't know at that point that Tron is still alive. Like, that's
the point is, it's just tacked on before.
But
it's really in the
I don't know what always bothered me about it is, like, if Tron actually saw that, then that would be a really fucking awkward conversation at the end of the movie that we just don't see.
Yeah, well, you were dead. I mean, for a minute. I thought you were.
It's kind of like Gulliver. I don't know if you're familiar with The Walking Dead, but it's kind of like how, like, Rick's in the coma at the start of the series, and then he comes back, and Shane is already with his wife. It's like, oh, awkward. Okay. Anyways,
I read the comic, and then I watched like 2 episodes of the show, and I was like, not for me, but I guess.
Oh, you pieced out like, man, you were.
Was Bernthal Shane?
Yes, Bernthal was Shane. Yes,
that makes sense.
Okay,
it
doesn't it, right? Bernthal.
It makes sense. Grimes' wife would go to Bernthal. Anyway, so yes. Let me tell you one of my favorite. I wonder if you had this too. So the digitizing laser I thought was really cool. I think mainly on some nostalgia.
Oh, what a great effect!
It's a great effect, but you know why I think nostalgically I really liked it? Reminds me pretty much of the premise of Scooby-Doo Cyber Chase, in which they get digitized by a Tron laser, exactly like which clearly they got it from Tron. It's just kind of funny, like, man, that laser did have a legacy. What do you know? Send you in the computer. Scooby-Doo loved Tron, ergo Cyber Chase. Okay.
So one thing I want to note, Dragon, because you didn't mention it in the background, do you know? I want to say with the arcade game itself, I'm pretty sure that they released the arcade game before the movie, or at least concurrently with the movie.
I believe it was concurrently, but I don't know. I don't know if it was like that far in it. I have to imagine it was concurrently. I'm not. Because again, they had like a marketing role at and they had plans for this sort of thing, and they had a lot of hopes, and there was merchandising. A lot of the merchandising kind of went by the wayside, so there's like a lot left.
The arcade cabinet, I think, is most definitely the most successful part of the actual. Like, I would wager to say that the arcade cabinet. I think the film itself probably has a better legacy nowadays, but for a while there, I feel like the arcade cabinet was almost more popular than the actual film.
I mean, that's the thing. So because of that, I imagine it was like in tandem, and then just had more stay power than the actual movie. And like they had other merch, like probably shirts and T-shirts and Rolling Stone covers and stuff, and that whole. Anyway, but one thing
I bring up the arcade game is that essentially the arcade game is like 3 different mini games, and they're all action sequences in this movie. So
I mean, if I recall, it's then in like the 4th level, like you're taking on MC.
Exactly. Yeah. The MCP is, I believe, it's kind of like a breakout kind of situation.
Yeah, like you're hitting like the little like little colored bricks.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have the light cycles, and then you have the discs, which is more of like kind of like Pong.
Yeah. Then you have like the wait, is the highlight thing like Pong, or is the disc thing like Pong?
Well, the highlight thing is the light cycles. Is that what you're talking about?
No. So when I say highlight thing, I mean like when they're throwing the little ball, the circle, it's the ring. It's the ring.
Yeah, that's the discs. Yeah.
Well, I'm saying there's like disc where they're throwing the frisbees, and then there's the ring game in which it's like every time you miss the ball.
Oh, right. No, there's that too. Yeah.
So you highlights the thing where you have like the lacrosse scoop arm thing. That's highlights.
Right. And that's more like Pong, I think.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. Anyways,
Anyway, yes. So,
It's kind of like asymmetric breakouts,
exactly.
or what's the other one? Is it Arkanoid? Is the other one?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
kind of
yes.
like that, where you're breaking the blocks, but you
Yeah.
have it on both sides.
a little Tetris-esque, one could say,
Mhm.
almost.
Yeah.
But obviously, a lot simpler than. Well, anyway. So, oh, by the way, I was going to mention two things. I was going to mention in the background. I was going to save it for here. So we go to NCOM. NCOM, they shot an actual lab during that scene. We had the big fancy door and everything. Which how awesome is that door?
It is
Oh,
just
so
so
good.
just like 80s Silicon Valley.
You know what's funny though? Is it's terrifying. Actually, I was just show you how dangerous the '80s were.
Oh God.
When so they're shooting in an actual lab for the interior, and I guess the door as well. When they're in there, there was an area that was roped off that had like a radiation spill, like a toxic
Oh
spill.
Jesus
And
Christ. Oh my
the actress
God.
who played Dr. Laura, she stepped in it.
No.
So they
man.
had to they told her like, don't move, and then they had the decontaminator foot.
Oh, that's awful. Oh God.
Yeah. So it's terrifying. The '80s were, my friend. So, other thing, they had to shift the colors. This is why you're probably wondering. We have we have very consistent blue and red kind of pattern through the movies. You probably noticed with like the lights on the suits,
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
and essentially there was originally supposed to be a yellow and blue and no red at all. So that's why in certain sections, that's why the one light cycle is yellow, because they couldn't change all the colors by the time they're in production. So they can only change because when the original Tron concept was yellow or like a yellowish orange. So that's why again, it's why you have that's why Clue, for example, Clue is in yellow at the top of the movie. I don't think that's not an intentional choice. Like we're going to make sure people know that Clue is not the. It's kind of retroactively a kind of a story thing.
Sure.
Like that's how we know Clue is not Flynn once he gets actually sucked into the thing.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
See, in retrospect, it feels like they would have had Tron and Ram be yellow by that logic if the users are blue and the other guys, but I don't know, it's a whole anyway. Also, in case it was when they do the effects for the suits, by the way, it's like 5 layers of rotoscoping. It's like they have like
It's so
5.
cool.
So
Yeah.
that's how they do that. So they have like hockey gear with like foam added onto it, and kind of like a not lycra, but it's like some material. It's like sheer. I call it sheer, I think. They have this material and they have like tape on it, and basically the tape is to mark off where they're going to add the highlight layer in there. So that's why they have like the black markings on the suit, which you can see sometimes. So it's like tape that they animate over, and it's like they shoot it like 5. They basically have like 5 different filters over it, and then they kind of lay them all together, and that's what the process of the animation is. So it's like they're shooting it regular, then they're filtering them in black and white, which is why the faces pop the way they do.
Right.
And then of course it's like the blue filter, and then just like the negative of the film that they shot. So it's really time intensive, and it shows.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see. Yeah, it's the games itself though. So Hyperball is like the ring game thing with the highlight arm, which is very. I'm sure Batman Beyond took influence from, because as Tiki's going to see soon, they do have kind of a future version of highlight in Batman Beyond, which is very Tron inspired.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Oh, yeah.
And there's like the one guy who's taking drugs or something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wait, hold up. Are we about to get a Batman Beyond drug PSA dragon?
I don't want to say anything.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Have you not seen Batman
That's
Beyond?
the whole. It's on the we're in the Batman Beyond phase of the animated Batcave, so I've seen them all. He's never seen them, so.
Oh really? That's
Yeah.
great. I'm glad that you're getting the chance to check him out.
We just got through
We've
I love
literally
Batman
been
Beyond.
working on this for like the better part of a decade, Gulliver.
Yeah, one of the first things that came out of our 3D printer was a Batman Beyond Batarang. So
Yeah.
Cool.
I have that on my shelf.
I have a few of those.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, we have like kind of the highlight game in which now we had a good bit there. Flynn refuses. Like,
Dragon,
again,
are raves involved in the Batman Beyond drug episode?
I'm not at liberty to say.
What?
I'm not at liberty to say.
All right, fine.
So, let's see. Anyway, so I love that they have this bit where Flynn refuses, in like a gladiator fashion, he refuses to kill the other program. And I like that these games are kind of gladiator matches. Essentially, they want to keep Flynn busy and make him think he can win before they kill him off.
In a way, Gulliver, you still haven't watched Andor, right?
No, I've watched like 2 or 3 episodes, but I haven't finished it.
Yeah, in a way, it kind of
It's
reminds
so
me of.
intense and just like I
It
just
is
haven't
very
had the
intense,
emotional
and it
energy.
gets more intense.
Yeah.
But without giving away too much about how this works in Andor Dragon, it kind of reminds me of how the prison works
Oh
in
yeah.
Andor,
Yep.
just in the sense of like it's like much like the shifts in the prison. This is like the gladiator games. They're not even really being done for any sort of entertainment at all. Like the actual gladiator games
I mean, let's
historically
be
were.
honest. The prison in Andor does have like a Tron look to it, anyway. So it's kind of a
Well,
Tron.
no, it's got a THX
Well,
1138
you
look.
know what I mean. Based on THX having an influence on this, and then Tron having
Yes,
an
yes,
influence on.
but it's Lucas, so clearly they're
I
going
know
for
it's clearly
THX 1138.
THX more so, but you know what I mean. There's
Uh-huh.
that might be even more reason the prison is reminiscent of Tron, but yes.
Sure, sure.
Anyway, so let's see. So then we have the disc arenas when we have the identity disc, which here's the identity disc is super important, but I keep feeling it get underplayed in the movie itself because right, it
Oh,
just
very
feels like
much so. It's very much just a MacGuffin and not a very interesting one. I feel like the actual iconography of him holding the disc over his head is like so much more interesting than how it actually
because
functions.
that's the thing. It works like it feels like hey, we're using this super important thing that all of our information, basically our whole Joseph Campbell like full circle thing
Totally,
is like it's the
totally.
whole point of why it's a disc, but it just feels like hey, we're playing frisbee. It's really what it
No,
feels like.
it is very clunky. Like, so basically, like breaking down the plot, I really dig the first act in the real
Mm-hmm.
world Dragon. I agree with you there. I think all of it is paced really well. It introduces, outside of the clunky, like kind of like what should have actually been the introductions. I feel like other than that, it's paced very well. And then, we get the gladiator stuff, we get the games. And I'm willing to bet you guys agree with me here. Right around the time that Ram and Flynn get separated from Tron, that's kind of where the movie starts to go off the rails as far as the plot.
When we escape the light, basically after the games are done, after the
Yeah.
light cycle sequence. I mean, to be fair, with the exception of after Ram's death, we kind of lose momentum. Then it's like that we're paced really. We're
By the way, what do
extended.
you guys think of that weird ass scene with them drinking the energy waters?
I love how that shot.
It looks really cool. It's just
I wish there was a plot reason for it to be there.
Yeah,
yeah.
The flavor of it is wonderful and like the performances are great. I just wish that there was more of a plot reason for
Agreed.
it to be
see,
Agreed.
what
there.
I wish happened was if one got injured and they were drugged back to
Or
that
maybe
area and
like
that
I
healed
don't know,
them.
like correct me if I'm wrong, like is it kind of used as a conduit for Flynn to kind of like unlock his user powers?
I'm
Yeah,
not. No, go on.
I was just say yeah, but they don't really specify that.
Right. Like I
Like
feel like if they
I
would
can
have
see
just
that argument for
emphasized that
sure.
more, it would have been a lot more clear.
I mean, for me, when I watched it the first time way back when, I always thought it was kind of like, again, the movie's a little odd about the whole. Are we in the computer? Are we in essentially a game? Given that we have games in the computer, but then again, if like the company would have access to the files and the blueprints and the code of the game,
Right.
so based on that, it kind of makes me think it was almost like a one up sort of life thing, like it was like it's like a health bar sort of thing, like that, because they do get injured a lot in this movie. They get hit
Uh-huh.
by they run the force fields and they get shocked the crap out of. So and the next movie it gets like pretty much hey, you get hit once and you shatter into a billion pieces and you're pretty much a goner. So it's a little inconsistent with how that works.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's I don't know. I always thought that, and I assumed like the purpose was like okay, if one of them gets hurt, like Ram, for example, maybe it'd be like a desperate plea. We're gonna drag him back to the water and we're gonna heal him, and then we never did that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Like a Lazarus pit, which of course very appropriate given Dave Warner's in this. But again, we didn't do any of that, so it was very on the money.
And the thing about like from that point on, the movie like it's not even that the movie gets complicated. It just gets really clunky.
It gets vague. It gets too vague.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we spent a lot of the movie just, hey, we're traveling on little beams of light. Isn't that cute?
But beautiful, awesome backdrop paintings, though.
That looks great. Yeah, I'm not taking that away. Like, hey, look at the splendor. What do we do? We're looking at the splendor. Are we doing
You know what it
anything
kind of
else?
reminds me
No.
of? It kind of reminds me of like I've never actually like sat down and watched this movie in full, but it kind of reminds me of how people describe the original Star Trek movie.
Yeah, about that.
Where it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, space.
Enterprise. Look at that. How many more? It's like a Michael Bay explosion the way we're shooting this ship right now.
It's like a very, very slow motion Michael Bay explosion. Oh,
yeah.
dear.
Yep.
I would kind of say like the sort of vision of it is really valuable to me. Like there's a lot of times when you can tell how much like studio interference there was in a movie, and this doesn't feel like that.
Yeah,
like
because
I
the
feel
studio
like
didn't know what to interfere with.
right. I feel like we got a very true version that it was close to what the director, truly wanted.
Yep.
And I think despite the flaws that are there, I think it's valuable to see that because there's probably a lot of stuff that wouldn't be in there if there was more interference in that way. We wouldn't have gotten as wild or as interesting of a film.
Totally.
So I'm kind of, I would lean that direction if that makes sense.
That's totally fair.
So the light cycle scene. Again, this was very much like the standout sequence in terms of the computer animation. This was like, like the idea of like I love the physical light trails and how treacherous they are. It's the idea of like, you're leaving that trail, which is how you get the other guys. It's like an instantaneous, it's the most anxiety inducing motorcycle ride of your life. It's like, oh God, do I turn now, left or right? What's he doing? This guy's crazy.
Yeah, I really do like how it's at the end of the day, it is actually like a well-designed game in the sense that like it's essentially like a video game of chicken.
Exactly. Yeah. It's also a very it's a clever.
One quick thing about the ride, like I haven't like obviously I've not been on the ride in Shanghai, so like I don't know how it feels. You know,
you lied to me about going to Shanghai.
But it bothers me that there is no sort of like dual element to the ride at all from what I can tell. It really doesn't seem like there's any sort of like it's basically just like you're in a motorcycle and you're going fast through the Tron world. It really doesn't seem like it has any of the danger.
I could be misremembering this because I don't think I ever watched Tron Legacy all the way through. I think I've just seen clips from it. I think the thing with Legacy, if I recall from what I've seen of that sequence, it's more just like it's chase before it's like they're going up against each other versus the original, which is like you are going up against the other players. Is that about right? Do you remember any of that?
I only saw Legacy once in theaters. I need to revisit it
because I think that's what the ride's doing. If I'm right.
Yeah, there's a big difference because it's 3D. Like in this one, it's a 2D top-down sort of grid view that we're seeing in 3D, but like you can't do other stuff.
That makes sense. Yeah, I believe the beams are still there in Legacy.
Yeah, you still have the trails.
Well, no, the trails are there, but I'm saying I don't think you can hurt the other guy with your trail, though. That's what I'm unsure about.
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I don't know what Disney
agrees that there's no danger element in the ride.
Where somebody smashes into it and then the rider flips out of the thing. Like when it hits it's like the bike goes end over end, and then the rider is like falling through the air as the light cycle's disintegrating around him. It's freaking cool.
How awesome would this be for the theme park ride? They'll never do this for safety protocols, I'm sure, but imagine this. Imagine you have basically loads in two places, so you're in one cycle and the other cycle, and basically the big crescendo of the ride looks like before the dip or the swerves and everything, you're constantly almost hitting the other rider.
Okay, well, Dragon, you've been on they have absolutely done that on coasters before.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. But Dragon, you've been on the Men in Black ride, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you remember there's that one section where you're shooting at the other car?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they should do something like that at the very least.
Yeah, sure.
All right, anyways, this isn't about the ride.
No.
I'm sure that we'll do a podcast about the ride if it ever actually opens in Disney World, which it won't.
In 2039.
In about 5 years from now, like Disney's like, hey, guess what, kids? We're going to delay Tron so that it opens against Epic Universe. That's right. Tron is our Epic Universe killer. 2025, baby.
But anyway.
All right, I'm sorry.
So when Flynn does regain control and everything, when Flynn basically realizes I'm a user, which means I have an ability the rest of these guys do not have, and I can control things. And of course, what does he do? This is a really fun sequence when he's driving the recognizer vehicle.
I love how goofy and cartoony the early CGI of the recognizer is, and how it's like bopping along.
Yeah.
I also really enjoy the sequence where it starts to break apart, and then he
yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
It's a fun sequence where he's just steering this thing. It's basically what if you flew a TIE fighter for the first time, which we eventually did in Star Wars, but just still it's kind of seeing that way back when. It's like, what if you are driving the enemy vehicle? What the heck is that like? And then of course we have the bit. I don't mean a joke, folks. We have the bit.
Yes. No.
Granted, I will say that him actually constructing the recognizer is probably like, along with how we destroy the Master Control Program, it's probably the biggest like Star Wars ripoff moment.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, Dragon, the bit. I'm sorry, the bit.
Yeah, the bit. Just the bit that has this little cute little very simplistic side. He's only there for like a scene, so he's not overstaying his welcome. He says, "Oh, great, another mouth to feed." Like, yes, no. Is anything besides yes, no? Well, no. It says yes.
Very much reminds me of Navi from Ocarina of Time.
Yeah. Let's see. But yeah. Of course, the whole sequence of like him bouncing around there and spinning around as he's flying that thing completely out of control, and yeah.
I love how when he lands it, the it kind of like disintegrates in pieces.
Well, each part he's breaking off, so it's like the bottom part.
Yeah,
it's not even disintegrating. It's just he keeps losing parts of it. It's like disassembling with each crash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's see. Should we talk about Dumont?
He's got a great costume.
In the room, which is his headgear.
He's got a great costume.
Oh man,
that's all I'm gonna say.
His costume is straight up out of like David Lynch Dune, dude.
The funniest thing to me about his costume is that I'm looking at it like, so he's like a sphinx. So he's
that's essentially the design, and it's like.
That's literally
I actually think it's probably like the one thing in this movie, like effects wise, that just straight up does not hold up.
I mean, it feels like an interpretation of the opening of Big, where Big was like that quest game. It's like, okay, now you approach the 80s version of the Sphinx, and he will give you the information that you need because he's smart, and he's based off the other smart guy we have in the movie. Walter, I think his name is. Yeah. So he does. This does lead when Dumont gets punished by Sark. It does lead to one. I think my favorite David Warner line in the movie, where he says, "Very funny, Dumont. Maybe I should keep you around just to make me laugh."
That's great. That is a great villain line.
So unless you guys want to talk more about how Tron's not really living up to his leading man status, we can talk about
I feel bad, too, because that actor is
he's a great actor. It just feels like he's
really, like, what I like about him specifically is that he is really involved in the fan community, so I really do feel bad dissing him.
Yeah, I mean, he was in the prop culture thing.
Right.
He seems like a nice guy. Tron seems like a straight shooter. The problem is he's not the one holding the gun. Or like the disc, I guess, in this case.
Oh, man.
The identity disc, which, anyway.
And again, like, would you guys agree that the actor playing Ram is probably more charismatic and would probably be a better, like, hero if we needed a hero besides Flynn?
I mean, sadly, yes. Doesn't it feel like if Ram were Tron, wouldn't you have a bit where, like, he gives him his identity disc, like, here's my disc.
Right, yeah.
In all of the, like, battle sequences and stuff, kind of just, like, looks scared and turns to the other guys. I don't know that he would necessarily make like a leading hero. I think his story could be compelling in a different context where like the users were not involved. If it was just exclusively a story about programs, I think his story could be interesting there. But he's not like good at the games and he's not like doing
He doesn't
a
have
whole lot
leadership
other
potential. Is what you're
right,
saying.
exactly.
I will
Yeah.
say his story is actually like he has like way less screen time in Legacy, but his story is a lot more interesting.
Gulliver, I think what it is that you're not wrong in that Tron does have more like he does play more as like the hero sort. But I think the issue is that you have more of a relatability and like there you feel that I don't know, there's more relatability and there's a vulnerability with that other guy. So you're right though in terms of feeling the loss. If we were to make him Tron, we would need to make him a little more brave. Or at least basically, if you're more of a cavalier sort of hero, like don't worry, Flynn, we'll get through this. So here's the mission, like something like that. There's a little bit more.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Errol Flynn charm, if you will. I don't know. Yeah. But one thing we here's the thing we can give Tron some points on. He goes up against Sark, man. Again, unfortunately, it feels like I begin more of it with Sark versus Flynn, just given the fact that in real life you had Flynn versus Dillinger. But yeah, it's still the Tron going up against Sark though is like a cool little sequence where he's tossing that disc through his head at the end. That's awesome when he just like chucks that disc right through Dave Warner's head like mohawks him to death. Then he turns and Dave Warner gets revived and he turns into a giant. Even back then we were doing the kaiju thing. It was big. It was literally big.
Yeah. I do like how it's like it's literally only for like 3 shots. So it's like they got the most out of very, very little with that.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And of course, we turn everything from red to blue once Flynn does the big hero moment where he gets his random kiss and then he jumps in the master control program and we kill off all the Dave Warners except for the live action one.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, and then Dragon, you get your wish. We have an awesome helicopter shot at the end.
I gotta tell you though, one last thing though with Warner though when
Sure.
with Dillinger, I love that we play his. This is a really classy choice. I felt so when Flynn, of course, gets revitalized and gets like the proof that he's been looking for, everything he wants. Then we cut to Dillinger's learning what's happened here, but he takes it because he was intimidated by the master control program, and so he kind of there's a quiet recognition there. So I love that he doesn't say anything. He just kind of he takes it like, well, this is an unfortunate setback, but it's kind of for the better, I guess. I don't know. Something really classy about his fate, which again, it's kind of like, oddly enough, since you brought it up earlier, Tiki, it's a little like Sorrento before we had that one dumb moment right after. Remember where Sorrento had his moment?
Yeah, of course I remember the dumb moment.
Sorrento, he actually had a true blue gamer
I'm
moment.
a really bad boy. I'm going to shoot the kid.
Well, no, not that. What I meant is like he's no. Remember, like he has his moment where like he's about.
Oh, you're talking about the whole like yeah, man. I like John. Whatever. I like The Graduate or whatever the hell he's talking about.
Well, essentially, he sees like
John Hughes. I like John Hughes.
Sure. Yeah, well, no, I was referring to like he's looking at the end movie. He sees the egg and he gets like all swept up in gamerdom with like deep down I do like this stuff, and that would have been a beautiful end for him. And then it's like he's in the cop car. Okay, listen, flunky, I have an idea, and then he gets punched. He's like, I didn't need that. We already had a really beautiful ending of that guy. And it's like I'm still scheming. That's the thing. It's like basically we did that here, but no, I'm still scheming. It's like I took it like a champ. Okay. So then you're right. We have quote the Muppet movie after an epic helicopter shot.
Right.
And Flynn's running NCOM. It looks like.
Yeah, nice little tag at the end.
Little trios reunited.
All right, so that's about it.
Yeah.
Final thoughts, gentlemen.
I think this is a true classic. I think there's a lot of things in this movie that look like the 80s and feel like the 80s. But I think there's a lot of elements of it that have lived on in other movies. And I'm not sure that, I feel like it's underappreciated as a classic. in a lot of ways, because people are used to seeing the elements that came from it, but not it itself, if that makes sense.
Sure. Dragon?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I value this film tremendously for what it did for what it did for so many things. And again, rewatching it is it's a fun experience. But again, admittedly though, again, kind of drags a little bit. Mainly, it feels like it drags because we are. I think because in the experimental way it works for the visuals, and again, I think we do some really good performance aspects. It just feels like again our plot. The plot just isn't quite doing it for me. So that hurts the rewatchability for me. Outside of like as Tiki kind of can illustrate, Act One plays great, and then of course everything up to when we leave from the light cycle sequence, there's just kind of like a stall that goes on there,
Mhm.
But otherwise, I'm enjoying it. I think it absolutely deserves the revelry, and again, I think it deserved the resurgence that Tron got. Admittedly, a little 30 years too late potentially, but I don't know. Maybe it gives people some time to appreciate. Not enough people, it feels like. But still, I don't know. Tron, there's something special about Tron. Tron does have untapped potential. If only we could get kind of like the story aspect a little stronger on Tron. I feel would have stood the test of time, maybe a little better. I think maybe it could have gotten to like like a goofy movie, kind of like kind of cult value of something. But then again, that went pretty strong when it came out. So just in general, kind of maybe the kind of the cult classic status might have been hit a little faster if the story were a little bit tighter. But again, I love this thing for many reasons, whether it be, again, the impact of the illustrated performances or just for the heck that David Warner is amazing in this movie. There's a lot to love.
Fair.
Tron's wonderful.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that I feel like more people should look at this movie like, I mean, from like a visual effects point of view, it's way, way better than I was expecting it to hold up. And, the plot is clunky, but I do think there's a lot of really interesting philosophical ideas in there. But I do think that as far as the legacy goes, legacy. What is a legacy? Sorry.
So close.
As far as the legacy goes, I mean, I think this thing is like, if not for the actual film itself, certainly the IP is freaking iconic. From the arcade game to the the iconography of the light cycles and the poster image and everything like that, and just how revolutionary the effects were. I do think this thing has cemented its legacy in pop culture. I do agree with you guys, though, that I do think, looking back on it, maybe the actual merits of the film itself should be discussed just a little bit more. But hey, that's what we just did. So what do you know? All right. Well, I'd like to give a big thanks to Theme Park Priest. Thank you, Gulliver, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a big thanks to all of you. Yes, you for making 2022 a really great year for the channel, guys. I'm Dragon, correct me if I'm wrong. This 2023, yeah, it is. 2023 is going to be the 10-year mark for the channel. That's crazy.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep.
So I'm definitely looking forward to it. We've got a lot of stuff planned out. Really appreciate everyone. I've always kind of said this, but like I feel like right now the channel is kind of like at the perfect spot where we have, we have enough people watching us for me to be satisfied with the community, but we don't have enough people watching us to the point where like it would become like, a problematic, like, oh Jesus, like there's too many eyes on me sort of deal. So, so I'm very comfortable with the growth of the channel right now. All right, everyone. See y'all later. Have a good night.
I fight for the user.
I should keep you around just to make me laugh.